So it should make the presentation a little bit more interesting, or maybe a little bit less interesting, that I have less challenges against me, because obviously the two fellas were supposed to be here are working in academies in Ireland, so maybe they'd have a different opinion or a different point of view. But I'll get the presentation up now anyway. Now, obviously, just wanted to get something going for the 7 a.m. club. So now we're on to the key points on the why. So where should our priorities lie? The reason I've done this presentation, there's probably a bit of bias on my end, just based on obviously where I'm living. So I've worked in Ireland and then also gone to the USA, where they've got the polar opposite system, where there's money to burn within their systems. So I've kind of seen both ends of the scale and worked in both ends of the scale for at least 2 years. Also, club visits to the likes of Oxford United, Aberdeen, and then Bayer Leverkusen would have helped kind of get an idea on what I suppose the level just above us are doing in Aberdeen, and the level way above us are doing in Bayer Leverkusen, and also the level that we always get compared to, which is England and CAT kind of 2 and 3, which obviously I would have seen at Oxford. And then another thing I would have taken into account is experiences from others on the Elite A. So we've had some great discussions on everything to do with the role already. So that would have inspired it. One thing I said was the personal development epidemic. So obviously one benefit of a pandemic is a lot of people have gotten their shit together in their personal lives. Maybe that is going to be affecting what I have to say in this. You can be the deciders of that. And then obviously the Republic of Ireland's ongoing football issues, which is more targeted at the academy, or the perceived issues that are going on at the academy. So what I had a look at to then decide where priorities should lie is obviously just a general kind of overview of an academy. So looking at League of Ireland academies at the moment, they're under-resourced in relation to funding and facilities. I think everyone knows that at this point, especially even if you're not in it, lads. I'm sure you've heard all the stories and pretty much gathered just about everything you need to know. Something you probably haven't gathered unless you're on the ground every week is they're overstaffed in relation to ability to pay coaching and academy staff. What I mean by that is every staff probably has 5 members. You're talking head coach, assistant head coach, coach, potentially an analyst, and definitely a goalkeeper coach, and then sometimes even a strength and conditioning coach. So we're talking about 5 and 6 coaches per age group, per staff, all voluntary, all at very best maybe making a small remuneration for what they're doing. Then you've got to take into account the fact that there's actually not as many contact hours as you'd expect. So it's not as if they're all coming down to take loads and loads of time. They might only get a little bit of that. Then we've got coaches that are overqualified in comparison to returns on investment in education. So what I mean by that is there's no such thing as overqualified. Obviously, it's brilliant that we have so many qualified coaches, but the cost I put together for an Elite A coach is minimum about 10K, I suppose, over the last 5 years. I would say if you spend 10 years in the League of Ireland, you might get 10K if you're lucky. 5 years, obviously, for the luckier lads, and then a couple of very fortunate fellas, or fortunate's the wrong word, lads who've worked hard to get there, but a couple of very lucky to be in a position where they might be receiving a weekly wage. I think it's 6 at the minute that are head of academies. So we're talking about a serious lack of return on investment for what you're doing, and then lack of contact hours with players in the League of Ireland in comparison to neighbours in England. That is always the comparison we're given. Yet, if you look at the first 3 bullet points there, I just can't, for the life of me, figure out why that's such a shock to everyone. And then the key context before going any further is players are already exposed to quality coaching. It's now a rule that you must have a license for 14s and 15s, 17s and 19s, and I think 19s and 17s will be as high as Elite A license head coach by next year. So the level of coaching that the players are getting should be up to standard based on the fact that there's a certain coaching badge you must have to coach them. The role of a head of academy is becoming busier. So again, you might have heard, somebody might remember his name. How I can't remember it. I couldn't remember it last night either. The League of Ireland fella that spoke, Will Clark, that's it. Will Clark obviously spoke to us on the last block there about how they're looking to bring in an EPPP kind of system to the head of academy's role and bring more admin and more work. And I was just there looking, saying, all sounds brilliant, but it just sounds like coaches are going to become judged on contact hours and admin work on top of what they're already doing, with no promise of any extra pay. So that's where the context for this is going. I had this in there in case Tom or Connor felt different, but the argument that will obviously differ uh, academy to academy. This is just based on the general assumption that I've seen, and then obviously I may be naive in those assumptions. Although from what I've seen, I've worked at 3 League of Ireland academies now, from the bottom to the top, and then I've also worked in America, so I get the feeling I have a little bit of an idea on where our priority should lie. So based on that, then I kind of done up a Maslow hierarchy of needs, I suppose, for the players and for the coaches. So I'm looking at our players at the minute. Sorry, lads, 1 second now. I'm looking at our players at the minute, and I'm saying, as I said, they're already exposed to really high quality coaching, which covers their basic needs at the bottom of the triangle there. The players are signed for a season and can move with flexibility up and down the age groups. So for me, safety needs are absolutely covered. If you're an under 15 who's exactly where you're supposed to be, you're looked after within the system. Similarly, if you're an under 15 that needs to be exposed to a higher level of training or more physical demands, you will train with the 17s under, I suppose, on a whim. It doesn't need to be this big melee of getting signed for a new team. It's never been easier to move up and down training sessions and have flexibility within that. And for that reason, I feel their safety needs are, I suppose, in terms of their mentality, is being covered. Playing time rules means it's never been a better time to be a player, and you've never had more guaranteed time on a football pitch where the love and belonging kicks into it. If you even think back to 5 years ago, there was absolutely nothing on this, and I can tell you now, there was under 12s and under 11s playing DDSL Premier Football, which is the equivalent to Sunday League football, which was prior to our League of Ireland academies. And I can guarantee you there was lads that were getting 90 minutes every week and lads that were getting 0 minutes every week. And there was nothing to stop that happening. So 5 years on, I'd say we've made a massive progression there. There's players all over the country guaranteed 50% game time pretty much everywhere, playing at the top. In terms of esteem, as I said, that means players are getting more contact hours than ever. They're getting more education than ever on and off the pitch, and they're obviously getting game time. So you're talking about doing really well high up the ladder, which ultimately means that because they're playing against best players across the country week in, week out, there's a great opportunity to maximize their potential, which is that blue tick at the top. So like I said, players have, as much as we keep complaining about how we need to develop them better, I personally feel, based on 5 years ago, even, we're in a far better place than we ever were. And we're actually doing as well as we ever possibly could imagine, based on the fact that we have no money in the game, and yet players are still managing to get all these things just here. Fast forward to our coaches then, and this is basically the whole point of my presentation, lads, is the head of academy role should be putting our coaches as our priority. I feel that our players obviously are in a good place, as I've mentioned. This is not me saying we put players to one side. I still think all of the obvious roles within a head of academy need to come into play. So your curriculums, your player development plans, your, I suppose, general vision on how player development looks, all needs to be a massive part of the role. But something that's been totally neglected is the coaches within it. And I think it's a ticking time bomb unless something is done about it quickly. So as we said earlier, we're totally under resourced in relation to full-time staff. We've got 6 head of academies that are full-time in the country. There's 24 League of Ireland academy clubs. I would say there's a couple of lads doing it for free and a couple of lads getting very small remunerations for the role. Within that, like I said, the staffing situation is just crazy for me. It's totally overstaffed in relation to bang for the buck. Everything's voluntary or expenses, and staffs have 5 or 6 lads there, all personal good to get there.
Okay. James.
Yes.
Sorry, which clubs have the 6 full-time lads?
Off the top of my head, Liam Carney at Cork City, Stephen McDonald at Dundalk, Rovers definitely, Bohemians definitely. And then after that, there's probably St. Pat's is the other obvious one. That's 5.
And
So
Cully's somewhere, isn't he?
Cully Shells, how could I forget that? I work with Cully every day. Yeah. So 6 Cully. So 2 First Division clubs who are considered sleeping giants, Kev, and then obviously 4 Premier Division clubs that are kind of your general top 4. Obviously that varies, but in terms of funding, your top 4 for definite. But even as I said, within that, Rovers probably only have 1 or 2 full-time outside of their main man. Everyone else has part-time underneath them, if that makes sense. So it's not as if even the clubs with a full-time coach, full-time head of academy, I should say, they're mostly dealing with lads that are in the same situation. There's only one fella that's after now getting a role in which he's paid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, like I said, returns on investment is next to zero for coaches, other than obviously the intrinsic rewards. I'm not a coach that's into money. If I was, I would have never left America. So I think that's some important context. I sound like I'm complaining about money all the time here, but I just think it's just obviously going to be an issue, and I'll get to the point on that, which is we're under resourced, which means we're not even covering our basic needs as a coach. So by that, we don't have, if you think of it compared to a human, you need a roof over your head, things like that. For most coaches, they don't even have the guarantee of the basic needs a coach would require. Maybe at some clubs we do in regards gym, genuine pitch space, and enough time to give contact hours. So we're covering maybe just about the basic needs if we're lucky. I know at some academies we're absolutely not. You would have seen it where some academies are using 6 different facilities in the hope that they might get a quarter of an astro or half an astro. They might not even have goalposts at the training sessions. This is the reality for some of the lower end academies with regards budget. Overstaffed, like I said, so your safety needs within the hierarchy is just not being covered. Literally, you're doing it out of good of your heart for the most part. If you're lucky, you're getting expenses, but usually you have to travel to get these expenses. So if you're a local fella, again, you're just simply not getting it. Or again, you might just about get your expenses. When it comes to love and belonging as a coach, again, like I mean, talk about love and belonging. Here, will you go get all these badges, and in return we'll give you the job with absolutely no kind of reimbursement of any kind. It's very much so self-made love and belonging for coaches. I don't think it's built in within a club's structures, and then lack of coaching hours means this is actually becoming an issue now where esteem is affected in the sense that, lads, we've got to do more, is all you're ever hearing. We've got to do more for these players. We've got to put on another session. We've got to get up at 6 a.m. and put on a 4th session for these lads. Meanwhile, you're talking to a bunch of lads that probably are working 8 to 6 or 9 to 5 and rushing across to coach these kids as it is. They've probably got a spouse or a partner onto them saying, how come you're spending all this time on a football pitch as is? So I just think with regards to hierarchy, roles need to become less busy, not more. But as you see at the bottom there, they're actually becoming the opposite. They're becoming busier with less rewards. So ultimately, if you're looking at that pyramid to the right, I think we're covering just about nothing, and maybe the top academies are taking the last 2 boxes. But with regard to final 3, I'm just not sure it's there. So like I said, coaching hierarchy and needs is something I've kind of come together there with the things on the right. So I'll go through them in more detail, but there's a really good coach to player relationship. I feel like the pyramid is just about ticked at every box for the most part in Ireland, as much as people don't believe it. Whereas the head of academy to coach relationship is not there. And that's not to say there isn't brilliant head of academies out there. I just think our major issue is we can't even provide the infrastructure to allow for a brilliant relationship. So, for example, I'm working in the League World. I've never not had a really good relationship with the head of academy. However, they've always had their hands, at least one hand, tied behind the back, I suppose, with regards to the role they're doing, whether that be financially or with regards to infrastructure, so on and so forth. So I've said clarity is DNA to mastery. Become an entrepreneur, put coaches first, less is more. And I'll go through them in a little bit more detail now. So again, this is all with regards making coaches our priority. Clarity is the DNA of mastery. So again, this is probably where we're just about covering it. If there is a good head of academy in charge, I am not ruling out that the things with regards to players are absolutely the most important. So roles and responsibilities, as well as expectations within training sessions and games, has to be made a little bit clearer across the board. So I feel like even in Ireland, there's coaches going out and taking games, and if they lose, they're not sure if that's a good or a bad thing because it's not been made clear. Oh, this is exactly how your job looks. I want you to put on 3 brilliant sessions tactically so that our players are developed for under 17s. As long as it looks like that's trying to be taking place on a game day, I'm not concerned. If someone sat down with every coach and said that, brilliant, then at least they know, okay, I'm not under pressure if we lose at the weekend. I can play every player without any stress. The reverse of that being some clubs might have the more simplified logic of, you know, the team better look good on the weekend, they better be competitive, and how that happens is up to you. At least then there's clarity around your role and you're not going into games confused as to what to do. So I think for the most part, head of academies are doing that, but there still probably is gaps across the 24 clubs. This is just the basic needs of coach, in my opinion, is clarity on their role. Understanding of the club's player development pathway comes into that. And then authenticity around curriculum development. So again, including coaches in what you're doing, not just handing them a curriculum saying this is what we're going to be doing and it's this way or the highway. I think that is also a risky strategy. Or if you're going to go down that route, I think head of academies have to be very careful about who they're recruiting, because I know these 3 things have come up across numerous clubs where there's either a lack of clarity on your role, a lack of clarity on what the pathway actually is and how it's supposed to look, or there's a lack of authenticity around it. So, oh, we want you to play and do well, but as soon as you lose 3 games, he's knocking on your door saying, what's going on here? So I think those are really important. And then just a couple of quotes from my own researches. Where there's no room for clarity, there's no room for integrity. That's Robin Sharma. Um, couldn't agree more. As long as there's no clarity, then there can't be real integrity in your work. It's very difficult to match the two up. And similarly, those who are in most control are most free. So again, if you've made it as clear as you can with regards the role, suddenly that's a lot of control. It might sound like, but it actually gives coaches freedom to then express themselves within their training sessions and within the curriculum, as opposed to the other way around where they're scared to express themselves because they're not exactly sure what they're supposed to be doing. Are they supposed to be winning? Are they supposed to be developing players? That is up to the head of the academy. Once that kind of basic need is covered, the next thing I think head of academies need to do, and I suppose the reason I'm disappointed the lads aren't here is because they might be telling me to F off at this point, but I feel head of academies need to become an entrepreneur at this point in the League of Ireland anyway. Find new ways to create academy revenue. Everyone keeps complaining about having no money. We keep talking about funding that simply hasn't came in my experience in the academies, and that's probably 6 or 7 years now. So for me, become an entrepreneur, figure out ways. So for example, a pre-academy could be started. It could be as simple as we only work with 14s, 15s, 17s, and 19s. All of those teams come in on a Monday from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock or 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Get the primary school kids in from 4:30 to 5:30 or 5 until 6. Charge anything you want. Obviously, if you want to make it inclusive and get the whole locality in, make it a $5 a session. Put on really good fun sessions at a stadium where all the kids can then aspire to be one of the first team players. They might get tickets at the end of a 8-week block, but suddenly you're actually getting some sort of revenue that you can then turn around and say, you know what, coaches, as part of your role, you've got to run in a pre-academy for 1 hour a week. It's on a Monday, but the benefit is we make 100 quid a week from it. You'll get a 50-50 split for running the session. At least then you can give some sort of, I suppose, remuneration for their work. You're adding a little bit. It's covering a lot with regards, I suppose, the locality and everything, it sounds a bit like a development officer's job. But as I said, you might just be able to find new ways. Camps is another way. Open days is another way. And then coffee. If there's the biggest pandemic outside of what we've been through is the coffee pandemic. Every League of Ireland game I go to at under 17s and under 19s level, there's a flock of parents, a flock of supporters who will come in to drop their kids, have a look at the warm up. They'll disappear for 20 minutes to go get coffee and a sandwich, and they'll come back. And I'm looking saying, I know I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not a business person, but if I was to throw out a few ham sandwiches and a bit of coffee from a machine and say it's €2 or €3, I know everybody would stay and buy it there. It's simple stuff. People might tell me it's not realistic and it's too much, or that's not our role, but simply put, if it's not your role, then you won't have money and you won't be able to pay the best coaches, and ultimately there'll always be those issues. Create a feeling of safety for coaches. So like I said, if you have the more revenue coming in, you might actually be able to give a realistic offer. I'm not saying offer full-time contracts, but you might be able to say you get this amount per hour, something similar to the Scottish model. And then above that, you can work in tandem. So build roles where you're this coach, but also you must work with the pre-academy or so on and so forth. 1 second, there seems to be an issue pressing next. So there was. I don't know why. There we go. Yeah, so imagination is more than knowledge. All extraordinary acts begin with a dream. Sounds a bit cringy. It's from Einstein, but like I said, if we keep doing the same thing, we'll keep getting the same results. So use your imagination. How can you create more revenue for the club within your role? And conformity is the jailer of all freedom, an enemy of all growth. We're not going to grow if we keep conforming to the norm. It simply has to change. And these are a couple of ways how. I'll fly through this, but put the coaches first. So it comes back to payment. Let's try actually make the roles appealing to them. Let's stop taking away their time for nothing. I won't repeat myself, but there's a couple of the ways that you can create an environment where coaches arrive at ease wherever possible. I won't delve too much into this because again, this is probably something totally new, but something I personally have tried to bring in is coaching warm-ups I suppose previous to players arriving or as players arrive when they're doing their 15 minutes. A lot of the times, a big issue you'll find in Ireland, like I said, is people that work 9 to 5 and they travel in the traffic to get to the session, or they work 8 to 6 and they barrel along and they arrive 15 minutes before the session. If they've had a shit day of work, quite often, we've all seen it, they might just have a day where they're complaining to players on the pitch. They'll come off after saying I was in a terrible mood. He wasn't good enough, blah, blah, blah. We've all seen it. So just something as simple as a coach's warm-up has actually worked really well with regards, I suppose, relaxing everyone before they go into the session might be an idea going forward. Again, be creative. I don't know the answers, but we've got to start thinking outside the box. And then in-house CPD and coaching events, use the expertise in the room. So we've so much expertise in the academies, and yet nobody's talking to each other. Really, it's just so many different separate staff and situations. So for me, something that could be done. I know it's done in England and Scotland again, and I think Niall O'Regan actually mentioned it in the A license. It's the expertise is in the room. So let's start using it a little bit better. That again might actually help build the kind of esteem within a coach that, okay, Matt, I think you're brilliant at psychology alongside coaching. Can you present to the group on your knowledge today or how you could implement it to your sessions? Suddenly, Matt feels brilliant because he's getting recognised for his work. All the other coaches feel brilliant because they feel like they're getting more than they bargained for with regards to their role. This is a quote from a book called Against the Elements. It's relating to the kind of rise of Icelandic football and what they done. People in Iceland are no different than their ancestors who are frustrated by lack of opportunity, who went across the waves of the Atlantic in search of education and adventure. They done something drastic, which was create a whole new coach education system and create roles for people. And suddenly they started to say, and by 2016, they seen the fruits of it when they done it really well at the Euros. So we keep comparing ourselves to England and all these big academies. Why don't we obviously keep them in mind, but also look at things like Iceland, where you see what they done with little to no funding. And then, like I said, less is more. Dual roles and team crossovers wherever possible. Make your money go further. I went to Bayer Leverkusen, lads, and they have 2 head coaches for their under 17s and under 19s with one assistant underneath. They share the role. So, for example, if me and Tim were working together, the 19s, I might manage them, and Tim's the assistant. And then straight away for the 17s, Tim might manage them, I'm the assistant. And underneath, you'd have one coach. So let's say Kevin's there, and he's also the analyst. We're talking about Bayer Leverkusen, who just sold Kai Havertz for 100 million, using staff more effectively than Ireland, who have not sold a player for over 1 million in God knows how long, because we can't. Be creative wherever possible, internships and offering a CPD. So again, Brighton's head of academy mentioned it, that they can't pay as much as Man United, but they offer much better educational and CPD services for free. And then also Aberdeen Football Club, someone so much more comparable to the Irish situation, have 2 full-time staff, and then they've got a bunch of part-time staff. But within that, they've managed to develop a system where they're now, after coming second in, I suppose, the Academy Awards that were happening with FIFA last week. So there are people I think we should be looking more towards when it comes to less is more. How can we maximize our knowledge and minimize our costs? People who feel good about themselves produce good results. Pretty simple one. And then blue ocean strategy. So what can we get rid of without losing any quality on the ground, and what can we add that will improve our quality? It's a simple system that is used within business. It comes back to that become an entrepreneur idea. That's actually a really interesting paper for anyone that's interested, and it might just be seen as businessy, but it's also very relevant to football in a lot of ways, because you see it right across the footballing world that we're probably not using all of our resources to the maximum. So like I said, with all that in mind, I feel we can get maximum coaching potential. The coach and player relationship stays the same. It might even improve because coaches are in a better place overall. And then the head of academy to coach relationship improves because there's a lot more on authenticity and I suppose development of that pyramid on the right. How it would look then, I don't know if it's coming up for you lads. It says there's 2 minutes remaining. We might have to make a new one to do the thing then, but I'm just about done. But like I said, recruitment and academy staffing would look like this for me. So under 17s and under 15s, similar to that Leverkusen model. I'd be asking under 17s and under 15s. They play on separate days. So we'd have shared roles for 2 head coaches, an assistant coach who ideally can do performance analysis, or again, being creative, we might use internships from a lot of the college courses around Ireland to bring in an analyst for weekend games, and then a goalkeeper coach. But they only attend home games. If they want to attend away games, brilliant. But player-led warm-ups is more than possible between the 2 goalkeepers in any given day when they travel away to these faraway games. I would have the same with under 14s and 19s. So suddenly now we've totally cut down on coaches, but the quality of coaches we can now be a lot more selective with because we have a bit more money to play with. We have a lot stronger a role to play with, and everyone's a bit more involved and a bit more valued within it. And then, like I said, that might just help us lead to those 5 things being ticked a little bit better. And then lastly, a working week at the academy within this system would be session 1. Head coaches obviously discuss their role prior. The assistant coach might have a bigger role on session 1 because it's just post-match day. Similar with the analysis, he might go through the performance. Goalkeepers might spend longer with the keeper coaches. And then like any other session 2 and 3, more significant role for the head coaches. Analysis to the opponents, and then less prominent, but still potentially prominent roles for assistant coach and goalkeeper coach. Match day then, like I said, you have a head or a lead every match day. It can swap, or if they feel more comfortable with coach and assistant, keep it that way. Analysts there to video games. Even better if you've got access to a video camera. There's no obligation for people to be there. And then, like I said, if keeper coaches want to be there, absolutely. But nobody's telling me the goalkeepers can't warm themselves up on a match day away to Finn Harps. So that's it, lads. There's a bit of recommended reading, and education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. There's a couple of things I've used, I suppose, both with regards to personal development